Bhaji, and I'm a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies. It is my matter of great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all to another edition of the IPL's Wednesday seminar titled China's Expanding Role in UN Peace Operations, Domestic Peace and Developmental, Domestic Peace and Developmental Peace. China from the permanent seat at the UN Security Council in 1971, it has strategically leveraged its position as a key player in the Department of Peace Operations at the UN. As a P5 member, China has used peacekeeping as a platform to advocate multilateralism and extends it. Interestingly, China's approach to peacekeeping has evolved with its concept of developmental peace, emphasizing economic growth and non interference, which contrasts with the liberal peace approach of the West. So, this divergence raises a very critical question of can these approaches coexist in the UN peace operations? By delving into Chinese language sources, today's seminar will seek to explore the domestic discourse surrounding China's role in UN peace operations and provide insights into the complexities of UN diplomacy. The speaker for this seminar is Dr. Yasin, a faculty member in the Department of Chinese Studies, Aligarh Muslim University. He recently obtained his doctoral degree from the Center for East Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and is also a recipient of the prestigious Institute of Chinese Studies, Harvard Institute Multi-Year Doctoral Fellowship. He holds a BA and MA in the Chinese language from JNU and a postgraduate diploma from Beijing Language and Culture University on the scholarship sponsored by the Government of China. Dr. Yasin's research contributions have been widely published in the Indian Journal of Politics, Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, the Queen, and China Daily. And the chair for today's seminar is Professor Alka Acharya. Professor Acharya is a chairperson of the Center for East Asian Studies, JNU, and the director of ICS. She has also been a member of the India-China Eminent Persons Group and 2 terms on the National Security Advisory Board of the Government of India. Her latest publication is a book titled Boundaries and Borderlands, a century after the 1914 Simla Convention. Her research interests include India-China Trilateral Cooperation and Chinese strategic response to the post-Cold War regional architecture with special reference to China's neighborhood. Before I hand it over to the chair, I would like to request all the participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. Participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise hand during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. So now I shall hand over to the chair. Over to you, Professor Acharya.
Yeah, I think I have unmuted myself. Thank you very much, Rekha, for that introduction. And a very good afternoon to all those who have joined us here today at this point, and to all those who may join us on the YouTube, and to all those who will eventually see this YouTube recording at some time or the other. Now, today's Wednesday seminar is a very special one, and the speaker for today's seminar is also a special speaker. And as you can see from the backdrop of just about all of the ICS personnel who have logged in, we are marking the 10th anniversary of the ICS HYI multi-year scholarships. And Dr. Yasin has very, very recently been awarded. He successfully defended his PhD thesis at the Center for East Asian Studies in the School of International Studies, and so he has been awarded his doctoral degree from the JNU. Now, Dr. Yasin is one of the recipients of this prestigious ICS HYI, and as the director of the institute, it gives me a great pleasure and extreme satisfaction to see yet another of the scholars of this emerging new generation to have received the benefit of what has now come to be widely regarded as one of the most prestigious scholarships, multi-year fellowships for the study of study and research on China in India. This is a scholarship that was started 10 years ago in collaboration with the Harvard Yenching Institute. And we are extremely uh, happy and grateful that this linkage has stood the test of time, and there is a certain degree of appreciation at the way in which we have been trying to promote doctoral research, which this scholarship enables us to do. Somewhere down the line, we also were fortunate to get the support of the Gargi and Vidya Prakash Dutt Foundation for supporting our doctoral fellows. And that is truly another source of support and encouragement for which the Institute is collectively thankful. And we would like to place on record our appreciation to this foundation, which has been started by the daughter of two of the leading China scholars in India, Professor V.P. Dutt and Professor Gargi Dutt. And it was their mission also to nurture China's research and scholarship. And I am extremely gratified that through this foundation, we are able to carry forward those hopes and aspirations of the earlier generation of scholars. Now, the final thing that I would like to announce before Yasin takes over is that next week we will be having a panel discussion which would feature some of the recipients of the scholarship in the past, those who are currently undergoing their stint at Harvard, and those who have been associated with this scholarship right from the beginning. And we will be taking stock of our achievements, our strengths, our challenges, and we hope that through this panel discussion, we are able to enthuse a larger number of people, to larger number of scholars in different universities of this country to apply for this. We will be offering information, pointers as to what we require in our potential applicants. What are we looking for when we search for a China scholar who will be selected for this prestigious scholarship? And a range of other issues connected with this scholarship. So I'm hoping that those who are um, listening here today and who are aware of such places and such universities which have PhD programs, not just in China studies but social sciences and humanities, will pass this message around, will plug it on their social media um, platforms so that we are able to reach out to larger numbers and hope to widen the catchment area. It is, as I said, one of the most prestigious scholarships, but also one of the most challenging. And I think through this Wednesday seminar platform, which will showcase the work of one of our recipients, we will be able to strike that extra personal chord. So, with those words of introduction, I will request now Yasin to present the topic of his PhD research. Of course, he will go somewhat beyond that as well, as we discussed, and speak about this idea of developmental peace, which he seems to look at as a emerging area of investigation and research, as something that the Chinese are offering as an alternative to the liberal frameworks that look at peace in very different ways. So it's not just about absence of conflict that can be determined or designated as peace. But the Chinese bring in their idea of developmental peace. Now, this is a very interesting theme, and I will leave it to Yasin to explicate on that, and then we can come in with Q&A at the end. So, Yasin, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thanks, Rekha, for that nice introduction. And also thank you, Professor Acharya, for taking out her precious time to chair the session. And at the same time, I'm also thankful to ICS for sponsoring me this prestigious ICS HYI multi-year PhD fellowship. And not only that, I think I'd like to acknowledge the kind of assistance by ICS during the pandemic time. It was quite challenging time, and ICS provided me some kind of additional funding during that challenging time. So I'm grateful to ICS for that. Well, so today I'm going to talk about China's UN diplomacy, the domestic debates and developmental peace. So with the, I think, permission from the chair, I can share the slides. I have prepared a PPT, and then I'll just share that slide. And then I think with each slide, I will also narrate a few things. So I think it's visible, right?
Yeah.
Good. So as you can see on the screen, it's China's UN diplomacy, and it's not exactly what I have written in my thesis in PhD, but this is, as Professor Acharya rightly mentioned, that it is little beyond that, or maybe it's little more focused on peacekeeping rather than other UN agencies and China's interactions. So for today's presentation, I structured this way. So first, I'll just give you a brief context or background, especially for those who are not very much into this subject of China and the UN, so that they can have the context and follow what I'm going to speak for next 20 or 25 minutes. It will be followed by a historical overview from 1971 to now. So it's more than 5 decades of China's involvement in the UN. And then I'll be talking about China's contribution, China's role, and various determinants of its peacekeeping approaches. And then I'll just try to unbox the domestic debate. Well, this is, of course, in relation to China's the principle of sovereignty and non-interference policy, and then the new emerging area, at least from Chinese perspective, or what Chinese authors are trying to build, which is developmental peace, Fajan Hefeng, which stands in opposition to liberal peace. Not exactly 100% in opposition, but I think there are also scope for mutual existence of these two peace. And then I'll just take some Q&A, and then that's it. So to give you a context, of course, it's a common knowledge that the UN was built after the World War II, and then China, as the victim of aggression, being China was honored to sign the UN Charter on June 26, 1945. But again, this China was Republic of China, which used to claim to be the representative of China. But then after 1949, after communist rule came to China, and then for PRC, People's Republic of China, Chinese Premier Chou En-lai expressed 3 letters to the UN between 1949 and 1950, requesting to restore the rightful seat of China. In addition, Mao administration also initiated to replace the delegation of the nationalist government in January 1950. However, the breakout of the Korean War punctured this effort, and it put the relationship between China and the UN at a stalemate. On the contrary, China began to develop disenchantment and frustration toward the UN, adopting a hostile and confrontational approach. China perceived the UN as a forum where the capitalist diplomats or politicians used to drink coffee, chat, and haggle. So, however, during this time, before 1971, China initiated various ingenious techniques So those techniques included banquet diplomacy. So banquet diplomacy, China hosted at lavish banquets important leaders from Cambodia, Congo, Premier Alfred Raoul, Ethiopia, France, and so many leaders. And then also in the people to people or ping pong diplomacy. So there is a record in Beijing Review that in that Beijing sent out 70 delegations to 40 countries and received 290 delegations from 80 countries in 1971. And then again, the next was state-to-state relations. From the period of 13th October 1970 to 25th October 1971, China established 17 and resumed 2 diplomatic relations. So altogether, there were some like more than a dozen of countries established relations with China. And then, of course, at the same time, there was increasing media coverage of this issue of China representation. And then finally, aid diplomacy. So China offered huge aid to the third world century countries in 1970. And the estimated aid was some 709 million US dollar. It was cited in Samuel Kim's work. So after employing these various ingenious techniques, the result was this. As we can see on the screen, so from 1970, we see that only 51 or 40% of the votes were in favor of China. But again, in 1971, after these ingenious techniques, there was some good support for China, and only 35 countries voted against, while 17 abstained, and 76, which is 58% voted in favor. Well, so then, although China restored its lawful seat in the UN General Assembly, but again, in the period of 1971, China was not only active. China was kind of a quiet listener or a quiet student in the classroom. China was closely observing and trying to understand or study the functionality of UN. And then, so in this time, there was in 1971 to 79. I tried to have a decadal overview. So in this time, there's one authoritative Chinese author, Liu, mentioned that China was selectively active on socio-economic, but not on political security issues. Well, so after 1980, 1981, of course, in 1980, we have seen this decade that China voted the extension of UN peacekeeping mandate for Cyprus in 1981. And its voting affinity with US climbed up 46% in the 1970s to 73% in 1980s. And it was also the time, but again, during this time, China's approach was more like a from system transforming and reforming and system exploiting approaches in the service of China's modernization drive. So China's modernization drive, we also need to look at the domestic issues in China. That time, of course, the reforms and opening up policy was initiated, and China somehow abandoned its closed door policy and superpower bashing foreign policy. So, and then in the next decade, of course, after the Tiananmen incident, there was isolation, sanctions, and it was sort of image. Okay, so China's image, and then, but anyway, China started to send its peacekeeping troops to the East Area. And in this context, Samuel Kim, who was I think the most prominent author of China and UN affairs, said that the China's code of conduct was to be firm in principle but flexible in application. And also during this time, China was somehow trying to integrate more into the UN system. But in 1990 and 1990, so from the ushering in of the 21st century, there was, I think, the 2002, the 16th Party Congress was a path-breaking uh, uh, moment for China's involvement in the UN. So, because after the 16th Party Congress, I think some of us are probably aware that China had three-pillared foreign policy, which is major power relations, developing country relations, and neighboring countries relations. But after 2002 16 Party Congress, there were two other components were added or adjusted in China's foreign policy, namely multilateralism and soft power. So to be very particular, I think since the 2002 16th Party Congress or Hu Jintao administration, so China started actively participating in the UN and also the peacekeeping operations. And from now, of course, there is I said the acting like an activist. Of course, it's not a statement; it's a question. So somehow, in certain aspects or in certain agencies, specialized agencies, China is acting more like an activist. But again, it's a movement or the chatter inside China is not very much in tune with kind of the behavior of a responsible major superpower. Okay, so this is something we need to look at it. Okay, so as we see the UN peacekeeping, as we move to the UN peacekeeping, of course, the traditional UN peacekeeping initiated in 1950s during the Suez Crisis, and then it was majorly between interstate conflicts, and there was the approach was only peacekeeping, not peace building or peacekeeping. Peacemaking, and now of course the mandate has been extended to maintaining stability and order, address to root causes of conflict.
Looks like our speaker's having some connectivity issues. Can somebody just call him up and find out uh, what is the issue? Oh dear. Do we have any information here?
Yes, Professor Acharya, we had a conversation with Yasin. He said that the internet is down, and so he needs to switch the internet. It may take a few minutes or so.
Yeah,
Ah,
I'm
there
back
he
again.
is. Okay, good, good. Thanks.
Disruption. Well, so I was here. So it's visible, right? Okay. So yeah. And then, as you can see, as you see the graph on the screen, this is China's continuous. This is in terms of providing China's peacekeepers, or as they call it, the blue helmets, the number of blue helmets China contributes. And these are the places. This is the graph I tried to do. I tried my hand in this artwork, but yeah, this is it. So these are the places where Chinese peacekeepers are there presently. And then China's contribution. So of course, China is the only P5 member which contributes the most number of UN peacekeeping troops, and also it provides it's a second budget giver in the UN peacekeeping. It provides 15.21 15.21% of the UN budget, peacekeeping budget. Also, also noteworthy to mention that although US is number one, which provides 27.89%, but again, US budget is also subjected to its own budget cut, and sometimes it's fluctuating policy contingent upon its regime change. So so today, China has, according to the latest white paper, position paper, since 1990, China dispatched over 50,000 peacekeepers to nearly 30 UN peacekeeping missions. It is the second largest funding contributor to UN peacekeeping operations and an important true contributor, contributing more peacekeepers than any other permanent five members in the UN Security Council. And today, more than 2,200 Chinese peacekeepers are on duty in 8 missions, and China also has set up an 8,000 strong standby force and a 300-member permanent police squad for UN peacekeeping missions. So, and then next, so the determinants of China's participation in peacekeeping missions, right? So, of course, China's the determinants of contribution to UN peacekeeping has also been ascribed to many determinants, be it political, military, economic, and culture, and also cultural, which is also in the framework of soft power. So economically, stability, as we see that most of the missions are also in African countries, right? So stability in African countries is in the interest of China, as it has close economic and trade relations with almost all the countries in the continent. In this regard, there's one author, Allen, he commented that being Africa's biggest trading partner, China is perhaps involved in deal making rather than peacemaking or peace building. And in terms of protecting China's overseas interest, it is also reported that Chinese peacekeeping troops also collaborate with Chinese institutions and organizations in the country of residence to protect the rightful interest of Chinese people and companies. And then, of course, the Taiwan factor. So soon after China joined the UNGA in 1971, the 1972 China cast its first veto, which was also the solo veto on the issue of Bangladesh, right? And then China did not participate in US voting. Of course, it voted, but it never vetoed. So, and only in 1997 and 1999, China vetoed against Macedonia. And the reason was that Macedonia was having diplomatic relations with Taiwan. So this one China policy has always been a factor in China's UN peacekeeping involvement. And then practical benefit for the PLA. Of course, I think all of us know that Chinese People's Liberation Army fought its last war in Vietnam War, 1979. And then it doesn't have any kind of practical benefit or so it also somehow provides Chinese PLA members to have kind of military exercises through these peace operations missions. And then reputation building. Well, so this is also a kind of crucial part of my research where I talked about that self-image or reputation building or status triggers China's involvement in the UN. So here, while reputation, so China, if we look at or at least skim through the other various journals or Chinese policy papers, so China always mentions that China wants to be a peaceful, responsible country, right? So that factor is always there, that China wants to be seen as a peaceful major country. And then soft power. So soft power is another factor for China's peacekeeping involvement. And then, of course, it directly benefits China to advance its soft power. I think I can talk more about it during the Q&A session if I'm asked. And then domestic debate. So the domestic debate is in relation to China's principle of sovereignty and non-interference policy. So in the beginning, China, of course, had this Deng Xiaoping initiated Tao Guang Yangwei, keeping a low profile. So keeping a low profile, not participating in the internal affairs or the major issue of the global importance, it's fine. But again, now there is a debate in China about its this non-interference and sovereignty principle. So there are three various groups of scholars in China. And when I'm talking about this domestic debate, of course, I'm only talking about the debate in academic circle. So there are three kind of understanding. So one is that one group says that, okay, the strict insistence of the principle or continuity of dogmatic interpretation of the principle. So means that we should not anyway intervene in any affairs of any internal matters of any country. And the second group claims that, okay, I think we need to think, and then discontinuation of traditional stance or abandoning the principle. And the third group of scholars are talking about persistence of the principle, but with pragmatism, creativity, and little flexibility. So, and the first group of scholars, they said that, okay, state sovereignty, national security, territorial integrity, national reunification, China's political system. So those kind of, if we intervene in the countries of other countries, then that might have kind of implications for China. And then, of course, as we know that as per China's white paper, there are three major issues in China. So spiritism, separatism, extremism / terrorism. So, and then, of course, the new thing is that the difference between kan she and kan yu. So from Chinese understanding, from Chinese psyche, now, like before, they have used these two words interchangeably, okay, interference and intervention. But now this kan she, if there are any kind of military involvement, military means involved, then Chinese scholars used to indicate, like, tend to use interference. So interference, they are using kan she when military actions or military means are involved. And while there is no military means involved, and China is somehow trying to meditate, or China is having a meditating role in other countries' domestic affairs concerning economic and political development, as well as diplomatic engagement, then they're trying to say, they have started saying, can you? So that's the new kind of vocabulary. But having said that, this distinction of words still needs to be made official, but the development in that direction is growing quite fast. So the new thing is coming up, which is that constructive involvement and creative involvement. So there are various scholars, mainly based in Peking, Peking University, Tsinghua, Fudan, and there are other some good universities. So the scholars are there, and then the debate is coming up. And then the next one is, of course, the responsibility to protect. So when there is kind of ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, then the international community has a responsibility to protect, right? And then, so this is a new norm in terms of peace building or even preempting the kind of conflict, which, so this responsibility to protect, but again, China's role, and also along with India's, have been very cautious. And I think both India and China are somehow singing the same tune of sovereignty, and both have their own sensitivities and internal issues. So, yeah. And then, so when we are talking about the peace or this peace building approach, so when we are somehow seeing the traditional peace being expanded to kind of multifunctional or kind of peace, so the new approach and then Chinese approach. So China's, so the new concept of developmental peace or Fajan Hafing. So there's one scholar named He Yin who have worked as the leader of Chinese peacekeeping troops. So he served Chinese police PP, and then he now is an associate professor. And I met him. And in his writings, he claimed to have coined this term, peaceful developmental peace. And then if you see the approach of these two sides, so Chinese approach and then Western liberal approach led by the US, so we can see that I'll just quickly skim through this. So Western liberal approach has universal outlook on human rights, civil liberties, while the Chinese is very particularist, stance on human rights. And then while Western liberal approach affirms the representative forms of governance, uphold people's aspiration for peace and economic development, suggesting countries that not obliged to opt between democracy and development. And then China also is embracing what are social rights instead of focus solely on this thing. So I'll also skip this because of the time constraint, and then I'll come back later if there's any question regarding this. And then the piece. So how these two pieces are there. One is, of course, originated from Western civilization, and then this person claimed, I don't totally subscribe this, but this Professor He says that it has its origin in East Asian civilization. And then, of course, as you can see that the top priority of the liberal piece is institution building, and while China's top priority is economic development. And role of government is small, big, transformational approach, radical and gradual. Governance is democratic governance and effective governance. So this is not my thing. I'm just quoting Professor He. And having said that, I also, after spending more than 5 years in this subject, I also feel that we also need to have kind of the existence of two P's for a sustainable peace, because sustainable peace in post-conflict areas, because we have seen already that what we see, the liberal peace, of course, that it was so the NATO attack, and then in Kosovo, and then all these things which bypassed the UN system. And then we also see how the major power or superpower US also advances its interest and sometimes bypasses the system. So, and if you see the recent example, like we tried to have sort of a new democracy in Afghanistan, and then we had to leave in the midway, right? So for a sustainable peace in a post-conflict areas, I think we need to have the existence of both the peace, because from Chinese perspective, the poverty is the reason for all the conflicts. So we need to fix that first. And then, so what is China's offer to global peace? Of course, as we talked, that developmental peace, Huffing, Fachan Huffing, it's a wrong, okay? And then now with this peace and BRI, of course, BRI is, it's going on, but again, we see that uh, GDI, Global Developmental Initiative, and then how BRI also aligns with that. And then through that, we see various infrastructural projects in African countries. And 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 then I think this is going to be an interesting area of research, that how GDI, BRI, or for that matter, Global Security Initiative and Global Civilization Initiative, and we can see that if China is also trying to position its peacekeeping missions and other actions in the framework of these new initiatives. And then status quest or norm entrepreneur. So when we are talking about norm entrepreneur, then China has to act as a real power, not only on the paper. So we also see during the Ukraine crisis and now during Gaza war, China's approach has been very cautious, very circumspect. So for China, I think to be a norm entrepreneur, so China's position right now on the issue of R2P, responsibility to protect, it has been very selective application from Chinese side, and that is somehow keeping China from being a norm entrepreneur. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasin. I think that was it was you had outlined for yourself a fairly ambitious kind of extent of your topic, but I think you have given us a fairly good idea about what your in major argument has been. Except that I would like you to just come in a little more, and maybe before we open it up to the audience, uh, when you say that you had your initial skepticism about this notion of developmental peace, but then you have been looking at this um, topic and looking at the issues within China's UN role. And you seem to conclude that possibly there is a certain kind of novel element in the way in which China is seeking to create new norms with regard to the connection between development and peace, or create a new discourse around this idea of development and peace. So, where would you stand on this, in the sense that does this carry any kind of meaning, or does it resonate with more countries across the developing world? In other words, the journey that the developing world started with, say, the post World War II era with Bandung and the idea that development was their right, to this day, when China continues to stress upon this link between development and peace, and therefore all its initiatives like Belt and Road, and stress on infrastructure and so on. So ultimately, my point is really that how do you assess this particular argument of China in terms of creating a new discourse within the UN?
Okay, so China has been successful enough to use or to include some of its policy words in the UN documents. Okay, and not only that, when sees some kind of like the policy papers or which are not in favor of China, China tries to water it down. Well, in the context of this developmental peace, and then how it stands in opposition to the liberal peace, we also see the kind of approach China is trying to employ. So one is, of course, China is getting close to the individual countries, especially in African continent. And then while they are, so we also see that there is Africa barometer, and then it actually gives a sort of, I think, a rough idea about the kind of perception. And it includes both public and private, public and elite opinion. So in that perception game, I think China is gaining more in terms of, like, some people are saying that, okay, although we know that China is trying to leverage its interest, but we also need Chinese investment. We also need Chinese companies to work here. So these things are there, and then China has been successful enough, at least to some extent, to convince these countries that this is this. And then while this liberal piece is there, they are saying China somehow tried to convince them that, okay, since you have this kind of system, and then once you have this new regime and new promotion, like new election or institution, so it's a new system to you, but you don't know how to function, how to sustain that, and that's how it's not working. And then China also differentiates itself from Western countries or Western powers by having the various kind of identities. So for example, that we were the friend, you black people carried us in the UN, and we are also the spokesperson of third world country, and we don't seek hegemony or colonialism. So this sort of these arguments and the approaches are there in China, by China. So, but again, this is a very new concept, like this, the differentiation of this liberal peace and Western peace. But again, the if we see that the logic of liberal peace, which actually emphasizes the governance model and an inclusive political setup, doesn't align with China's political system. So while robust peace building process identifies all the political actors at multiple levels, I think China's intransigence on sovereignty and non-interference sidetracks the collective efforts. So however, this period of
Okay, I
peace
think you opened up an entirely new dimension here, Yasin. But let's stop it there and open it up. I'm sure there are other people who would like to come in with their questions. So, Rekha, can you, or if there's a host who can look at the questions and see if there are any questions in the chat box. I don't as yet see any hands or anybody wanting to intervene. Are there any in the chat box?
Oh, ma'am, no, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So are there anybody? Is there anybody who would like to come in? Please step into the debate. Oh dear. I think there is
Okay.
quite a lot that you have given them to think about. I think everybody is now maybe digesting what you had. Okay, Professor Mohanty has raised his hand, so I think Professor Mohanty, can you just unmute? Can he be unmuted so that he can just come in and make his intervention?
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you. I enjoyed the presentation, Yashin. And I'm intrigued by this concept of developmental peace. And is it Fachan huffing or huffing?
Pachan huffing.
Fachan huffing. Okay. Some years ago, the term China was pursuing peaceful development. That development was not a threat to anybody, and you remember that discourse. So from that, now this developmental peace as an element of the communication with wherever Chinese Chinese participation in peacekeeping operations is. You find, of course, they seem to be quite consistent, but that is China's own path of development, and China believing in similar development in other countries and contributing to that. But how does this discourse get responses from the local countries? Does it acquire enough credibility wherever the Chinese are present in terms of peacekeeping operations? In other words, if the context is that of a more active role, even though they talk about on certain issues where they are very cautious, as you rightly said, in the UN on Palestine and so on. But I mean, there are elements of an activist foreign policy today, particularly trying to face the US challenge globally. Therefore, is this concept of developmental peace, getting credibility?
Okay. So, okay. Well, so thank you, sir, for making that observation and also the question. So Of course, this is not developmental peace. This is peaceful development. Sorry, developmental peace. So Fajan Hofing, not Hofing Fajan. So Fajan Hofing, of course, refers to countries' commitment to pursuing economic growth and modernization while maintaining peace and stability at home and abroad. And to your question, to be very particular, that is it getting traction from, or what kind of responses it's getting from other countries? So this, of course, as we have seen that most of the Chinese peacekeeping operations are in Africa, right? African countries. So it's getting somehow mixed response. So some people are also critical about it, and some people, again, then we have to see which countries are there. Like, of course, if you see Zimbabwe, China has been very favorable to Zimbabwe while voting in the UNSC. So especially in Zimbabwe, people are very much in favor of China and this kind of developmental peace. And having said that, this is not already there in any sort of Chinese policy papers or governmental official reports. This is in academic writings, and this is the sense or kind of chatter I see in China. So these group of scholars, they're trying to build this kind of new narrative or new idea of this peace. And this is not there in Chinese, any kind of position paper or Chinese paper on UN. So it's only in academic circle. And this is and then while I talked to the Professor He Yin, who has coined this term, and he was very passionate about it. And then even recently, when I presented a related paper in University of Nevada, and I posted it on WeChat, and he was curious enough to message me that, okay, what you're working on, would you like to send your paper to me? And he's working in Addis Ababa. So what I see that led by him, but a few Chinese scholars, they're trying to build this developmental peace in this Chinese peacekeeping regime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think this is going to be a very interesting area for, if, as Yasin says, this is not yet a part of the official discourse. So certainly the academic debates can be animated by this idea. It is it's meaty enough to be able to take hold of imagination. I think those in the developing world are clearly seeing the link between development and therefore stability and peace. So this is an interesting area that is unfolding. Now, any other hands? Otherwise, I have.
There's one on a hand.
Yes, who is it?
Rappai Maliakal.
Okay, Rapaiji, you can come in first, and then there are some queries from your supervisor, so I can bring them in later. But yes, Rapaiji, please come in. Unmute him if he is muted. We can't hear you, Rapaiji.
We have unmuted Mr. Malaikal.
Can you? Can't even see him. Okay. So let him stay unmuted, and the moment he can, maybe he's having some technical issues. Let me, in the meantime, if any other hands up. If not, then I shall read, because we will also be now soon coming to the end of our time here. So Vikas, my queries to Yasin. So he had sent it to Vikas, who sent it on to me. Congratulations, Yasin, for becoming a PhD. And it's joy for the supervisor seeing you, faculty at the AMU. So applause. Now, there are 4 questions. I think I'm just going to take the top 2 because they are fairly extensive questions. So the first question, which I think is an important one, is the UN is very perplexing on issues like Gaza and Sudan. Does this reveal a slow decline of the world's foremost multinational institution after World War II? I think this question should be addressed from the point of view of the Chinese position. Not in a general sense, because the Chinese certainly seem to take the UN very seriously. So do they also see a decline in this institution, or they feel that it still has relevance and they are therefore playing a greater role? I think that could be the first question. The second is related here. Is China wanting marginalized UN and introduce its own multinational institution framework with different characteristics? I think let's take these two because the last one broadens it in terms of variables of Xi Jinping's foreign policy. I think we'll leave that for another discussion. But these two, which are related, I think, is the UN declining in influence? And is the Chinese perspective to strengthen it or build alternative institutions? Yeah, go ahead, Yasin. Is he frozen? Oh dear.
Yeah, Alka, I can come in if you permit me.
Sure, Rapeji, but only thing is our speaker is now,
Oh,
it seems he is frozen. Yeah,
no,
he's gone
no.
out again. So I think we'll just wait. We've got about 10 minutes or so. Right? Host, will you tell us how much more time we have to go on?
Yes, Professor Acharya, we have 15 minutes or so
Oh,
to at
15
best.
minutes or so. Okay. So let's hope, there he is back again. So, unfortunate technical issues, Yasin, there. So I think you can put this question aside, and Rapai has come in. So let him ask his question also, and then you can take both questions.
Yeah, thank you, Alka.
Hmm.
Mohammed Yasin, thanks for your presentation. I think you brought out a lot of new issues and China's approach to UN. I would like to take little focus on the PLA, what PLA learned or what the Chinese other forces during their peacekeeping operations, what they learned. I think if you can highlight some of the things, but my broad understanding is China used this, or for that matter, any country's military uses this as their interaction with other militaries. You know, they get new opportunities to understand crowd control and other methods, and PLA also use some of these views, and generally the soldiers, not in the near this thing, when in the late 2010 or 2011 and 14, that period, the PLA soldiers or the officers I met, they were comparatively happy. Of course, they have their own grievances, but what is your experience? What PLA is trying to gain, or what are the modern methodology they want to use? Thanks.
Okay, you can take both together, Yasin.
The previous questions, the decline of relevance.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I'll first answer Rappai Maliakal sir's question. So, what kind of new approaches Chinese PLA are having, right? So, I think by the UN, in 2021, while this was the 50th anniversary of the China's inclusion in the UN peacekeeping or UN system, the UN literally thanked China for its disciplined and efficient blue helmets. This is the kind of, they are only seeing the figures and data points of the kind of money China is providing, and also the presence of Chinese troops of blue helmets in countries. And then of course we cannot take everything at face value, and that's why we need to see how the recipient countries and also the blue helmets from other countries, they are seeing Chinese PLA members or PLM. So while like Indian contingent were highly appreciated for its daredevil approach, but Chinese, when there is huge tension, Chinese, they are claimed to be like lock the door and inside the room. They don't go out. They don't want to take risk. And initially, from the beginning, these Chinese blue helmets were engaged in mainly in medical assistance or engineering works. So it was low risk job kind of stuff. So China only sent medical troops and engineering teams. But now although China sees that PL is there, but again, Chinese blue helmets only work with other countries' members. But unlike Indians or some other countries' contingents, so that is one thing. Second thing is also there is a clear link between the some of the Chinese companies and then this positioning of these blue helmets of Chinese blue helmets. So sometimes they are more like securing and protecting their assets and populations in those countries rather than truly engaging in peace building activities. So this is the one thing. And then we also see, I think there are 4 UN specialized agencies where Chinese nationals are heading. So while we also see the sort of like decision making and then the kind of hands China have in those decision making activities. So one. Second question is the relevance of UN and then the Gaza war, right? Of course, it is a challenging time for the UN, but again, we don't have any alternative, right? And despite having its own some sort of drawbacks, it's still functioning. And then I think it also the responsibility of all the nations. While one country is bypassing or doing things, but again we see the kind of efforts by the leaders of these UN and UN agencies from, and not only UN, like even WTO and all these people. So people who are there in the position, they're trying their best. But again, so this is a kind of tool, and then we also see the kind of ambition and aspiration all these countries have, and how only superpower could also only superpower's actions could also pose as a threat. And then we see, but again, I think since we don't have any alternative, only thing we can do is we can actually see and participate in increasing its efficiency and also its transparency and more democratized UN. And for then, UN reforms could be one aspect to work on. And then on the Gaza war, I think this also comes with some sort of R2P concept. So Chinese foreign policy is largely directed by the principles of non-intervention, right? As I mentioned. But war on Gaza, China's profile and interests in the Middle East continue to grow. And the current crisis gives Beijing the opportunity to take a greater role in stabilizing the region and protecting Chinese interest. So while there was attack by the Hamas on Israeli people, there was no condemnation from Chinese side. But when there was attack on Lebanon, China said that we are for Lebanon, we are for justice. But again, this is not only for China. This also, I think, stands true for US. US, what it is fighting Russia, and then it doesn't make sense what's happening in Gaza war. So we see the kind of international division of humanity, and then our actions also reflect that. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Right. I think we have time for one more question if it comes in. Is there anybody? Yeah. Chat. Your voice is breaking, Rekha. Okay, yes, I can see this question. Let me read it out here. My name is Shrey. I'm currently working as a research intern at the National Maritime Foundation. Right. My question is, how is China evolving soft power diplomacy? How is China's evolving soft power diplomacy likely to shape global perceptions and advance its strategic interests in the coming decades, particularly through the MOOTW? Yes, Yasin, you can
Yes.
also see it in the chat box.
Yeah. And advanced strategic interest. Well, so China is very much engaged in advancing its soft power. Okay. And then China, like as Xi Jinping recently said, I think 2 years back, that we have to tell a good Chinese story, right? And then it's talking about cultural influence. And then then soft power is, of course, is one element. The cultural thing element is one component of soft power. And then while I think the talking about China's soft power in broad way, I think it's outside the scope of my presentation today. But what I see from peacekeeping or from in the UN system, so there is a good country index and GCI, Anhalt GCI, and then in that ranking, if you see that China, in certain aspects, so there are various parameters, yardsticks, and one category is that you can raise your soft power or you can raise your rank by sending troops and also giving money on time to the peacekeeping operations. That is one. So China is number one because China has a great reputation in terms of giving money on time, and also there was no cases against including sexual harassment cases against Chinese peacekeepers. But although India acted on time, but there were some cases. Anyway, so the one thing is that, and second thing, when Chinese troops are also participating in the countries of Africa, especially, for example, like like helping people, and then so they're also somehow winning their hearts. And there's another country, for example, to increase the soft power, Bangladesh. In Sierra Leone, Bangladesh, Bengali language is the second national language. And that influence is only because there is the huge number of Bangladeshi peacekeepers. And that's how the Bengali became one of the national languages of that particular country. Imagine a Bengali being a national language in an African country. So that's how. So I think that these peacekeeping activities has scope for China to increase its soft power. And then to your question, particularly uh, like China's strategic interest in the coming decades, particularly through military operations other than war, I think China is also building up. And then I think we can talk about in details in later occasions. Yeah, so here I only looked at China's peacekeeping advancement through peacekeeping, China's soft power advancement through peacekeeping. Yes.
Right. Shall we now wrap up this because we are almost on the just the last few minutes, and I think there will be general agreement that this has been a very interesting presentation. As I said in the beginning, it was a special one, and Yasin, you have indeed given it a special touch. Of course, the slightly tongue-in-cheek information, Bengali being is it national official language, or is it just widely spoken? I don't know. I mean, I find that difficult to believe that it will be the national language.
Not national language, one of the official languages, official.
Oh, okay, right. That's interesting. So this I did not know. So thank you
Like
very much.
Bengali and official languages in India, the same.
Ah, I see, I see. Okay. So there's a large number of Bengali living, I mean, Bengalis or ethnic Bengalis there.
No, because of the peacekeepers, presence of Chinese Bangladeshi
Oh,
peacekeepers.
I see. Okay, right. All right. So this was something new for me. But on the more serious end, I think this new element that is coming into the discourse of peace studies, whether they will bring in serious consideration of what is clearly an attempt by the Chinese to redefine traditional notions of peace, conflict, and um, how to address conflictual situations. So clearly, the developmental plank is one that the Chinese have in great of, and through their various initiatives, they are ensuring that the idea that China is a great source of resource, I mean, great resource provider, as well as having the necessary technical supports assistance. So we look forward to you bringing out something that can actually introduce this new discourse of China into even writings that we are seeing here, and hope that this will be a good contribution of your thesis to the overall scholarship on China in India. And thank you very much once again. And yes, yes.
Yeah, one second, just to clarify that this is also the Indian Express report, how Bengali briefly became an honorary language in Sierra Leone. The contribution made by the Bangladeshi peacekeeping force was hugely appreciated by the Sierra Leone government. So that's it. It was briefly honorary language.
Okay, okay. So these are the Bangladeshis who have set up
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Okay, fine. So so then, thank you very much. And as I said, I look forward to looking at your writings on this theme in the future with great interest. Now over to you, Rekha, to sum up today's seminar.
Thank you, Chair. I think your permission for making an end to today's session. So with this, we come to the end of today's discussion. We thank Dr. Yasin and Professor Alka Acharya for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their precious time. The video for today's discussion shall be available on the ICS YouTube channel. We would like you to invite to the upcoming Wednesday seminar scheduled for the 22nd January 2025. Further information regarding the event can be found on the ICS website, and you may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you all once again.